Welcome to Two Deep, Hokies Under the Influence, a Sons of Saturday podcast. My name is Pete, and you guys know my co host, Robbie. And tonight we have the privilege of also being joined by Doug Bowman, a 247 Sports and VT Scoop contributor and writer. Thanks for joining us tonight, Doug. How you doing, man?
Thanks for having me. Glad to be on. Big fan of you guys and what you guys do, and been listening for a while. So happy to be here.
Awesome, dude. Uh, as is customary, Robbie, give us a cheers. Kick us off here, man.
Yeah, I'll give us a cheers. Well, cheers to obviously Doug coming and joining us on the podcast, and also to a little bit of positivity on the recruiting and transfer trail. It has been a long 5 years of kind of suffering, I feel, for Virginia Tech fans, and not that we are out of the depths of it, but it feels like we got a bit of momentum, and it feels like a lot of positivity around the program, and definitely filling some gaps here and there that we'll get into with Doug. But a big cheers to the staff and kind of reorienting the ship, hopefully in the right direction for us. So cheers to everybody involved in that, and the players as well.
Cheers. It has been a wild couple weeks of recruiting, and we're going to get to all that in detail. We're going to talk a little bit about the blue chip ratio. That's something that Doug wrote about in the last 2 weeks. We're also going to talk a little spring ball with Doug, get into the position groups, drink some beer together. And at the end, Robbie and I are even going to give our initial 2023 season predictions, record predictions. So that should be something that you should not pay any attention to, but we're going to do it. And then after our summer previews against the teams we're going to go up against, we're going to redo it before the season. So you'll get that at the end, but I don't want to waste much time because we got a lot of stuff to talk about with Doug. And first of all, this offensive line recruit that we got in the portal, that was one of the biggest things that's happened in this offseason to me, because we've all been waiting to get a commitment on the offensive line because of how poorly they played and just because of the lack of bodies in general. And Clayton Frady committed to the Hokies a couple weeks back, and from Gardner Webb, big kid, 6'5", 290, and he's got 2 years left, which is really big. What were your thoughts on Clayton committing to the Hokies, and how do you see him fitting in on our offensive line, Doug?
Yeah, it was I think what you covered, it was a much needed get for Virginia Tech. Guy with a couple years of experience and a couple years left. He's played a ton of snaps there. I think one of the themes I'm going to be watching in the fall is there's Tech brought in a lot of transfers this year. He's another one that are moving up a level, that are moving up 2 levels in his case. So we're really going to get a good opportunity to see how reliable that move up is. But Tech was obviously looking for him, looking for an offensive lineman in the portal. I mean, they were looking going back to last summer. They were desperately trying to find one. Needed another option anywhere on the offensive line, really, just depth anywhere there.
Especially with our tackles, right? I mean, that's. Do you think he'll come in and play tackle, or do you think he's going to factor in at the guard spots?
I'll be interested to see what they do there. Whether Chaplin's going to move inside, I don't know if he's a natural left tackle. So I don't know that either of them is a natural left tackle or the best bet, but they're going to try and make do with their best 5. This is really going to be the definition of finding your best 5 at any position. You go back to the years of like Vance Weiss shuffling the offensive line until right before the season, just trying to identify the top 5 guys at any spot. So I think there's a lot of interesting things. Like if he's going to play left tackle and you slide Chaplin inside, are you going to flip Braylon Moore over to right guard where there was that battle between Schick and Jesse Hansen? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of, I think he helps in that you're trying to get 7 guys that you feel comfortable, maybe 8 in an ideal scenario, and he's definitely going to be one of those. How it shakes out as who the top 5 are is going to be one of the stories of August, I think. I don't think anybody can know for sure, and he may just be like the swing backup guy, and if that's all he is, then great, that was needed too.
Yeah. It's very true. He's gonna be factoring into the 2 deep in some way, whether it's as a starter or just as that utility knife backup. But desperately needed. Rob, did you have any comments on Frady?
No, just that you got to get to 7 and hopefully 8. That only covers you from injury. That's not even, getting any depth at the position. That's just in case something unfortunate happens to any players, throughout the season. And I think that's the most frightening part. So anyway, it's positive news, but it is still a grim outlook for the position overall in terms of what they're staring down at. And it reminds me, Doug, your example of back to the Vance Vice situation when we were dealing with that. And I remember going into the season and we were like, we had no clue who the 5 were going to be. And it was just moving people around. And he's like, yeah, I want to make sure everybody's versatile and they can move around. You're like, no, you got nobody. That's what's happening.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about the offensive line picture is it's the exact same as it was last year, essentially, where you're just hoping. Like last year, Tech was lucky to not have a big injury on the offensive line. Like that, Joe Rudolph, they weren't any good at an offensive line, and he still didn't rotate anyone. Parker Clements didn't have an offseason with his torn meniscus last year, and he played like every snap at right tackle, no matter what was going on. So, it was the same situation as up until, it's still pretty similar, but they've at least got some help here to give them a little bit.
I was
of
hoping
leeway.
when we picked him up that maybe there's a chance he could play left tackle, but what I've read and the way it seems is it's just not going to happen because in a perfect world, a guy with this many snaps being an all Big South, I know he's from FCS, but the size translates. He should be able to play at this level if he was all conference at the previous level, but it's a big position switch going from that right side to the left side because Chaplin is really the point where that's such an important position and we just don't really know what we're going to get out of him this year.
Yeah. The other thing with Frady is it's June. He's not going to, his first practice is going to be August, 4 weeks before the season. You gonna stick him at left tackle, like right up against it and hope for the best. I guess that's the case with any of the spots that he may jump in as a starter at, but left tackle in particular is such a critical position to have some stability and some confidence there. And I kind of lean, I know Chaplin was hurt for the spring game, but I kind of lean towards the guy that at least had, 14 practices in the spring at that spot.
Yeah. He was literally all conference on one of the teams, all 3 of his seasons that he played for Gardner Webb. So to me, if I had to make a prediction, he will be in like one of the 5 guys that takes the most snaps on the offensive line. I don't know if it'll be starting snaps or backup snaps or which position, but he will be one of the top 5 is, barring injury or whatever else. But it was a big pickup. It's something we all wanted. We still have 1 scholarship left. Now that may end up getting filled by a guy on the current roster that's deserving of it. I don't know if I think that'll happen, but nevertheless, we really needed this and it'll be a boon for us during the season. If there are injuries, even if there aren't, because I think he's going to play a lot. Let's move on to the high. Oh, sorry.
I just had one more thought on that. Was like they had to get him, right? Because the portal options were down to him, and they'd missed on Everett, and I think they looked at a couple other guys, but like if it wasn't him, it was going to be another. They weren't going to get anybody.
Yeah, there was that kid that was going to visit. But then canceled his visit at the last minute, and it was like, okay, it looks like we got Frady. But I really thought, and there was a lot of sense that we were going to get Everett. Like it felt like we were going to get Everett, and all of a sudden he committed to OU, which it's hard to deny that with the offensive line history they've had.
Right, and SEC and big time OU is going to be tough. They're just one of those programs.
Yeah, it's kind of like how, and he was a big like Tech fan his whole life, right? Like he kind of wanted to come to Tech the first time around, and then he bounces around, whatever. And then the second time around, it's like, okay, now we got a good staff in place. Like, come play here. It's like Mike Trout. Like he's a huge Eagles fan. He's from Philly. You've been a free agent. You don't actually want to play for the Phillies. You like it in LA. So I think the lights shone really bright down at OU, and that's where he went. So what can you do? But I'm happy to get Frady. in some ways, he's played more than the kid from App State. So he could be better. You never know.
The Everett thing just shows you how desperate people are for like decent offensive linemen. Like Everett, like he lost his starting job at App State as a center, and like went to Oklahoma because they had a hole on the offensive line. They needed an offensive lineman, and that's such a valuable position. And it's just like so tough to land like a good offensive lineman because everyone needs them and everyone wants anybody with a pulse who's played a decent amount of snaps.
Right. If you've got long arms and you weigh 300 pounds, and it's the second iteration of the transfer portal, like you're in the spring portal, like, you're going to get some looks because people are desperate.
Right.
All right, let's move on to the high school recruits because this is where it was a huge weekend. The weekend of 6/10, we got 4 commits in about 48 hours after the weekend ended. And the big commitment was the 4-star Gabriel Williams, but it wasn't the only 4-star on the weekend. We got another one in 4-star cornerback Marcellus Barnes from Chattanooga, 3-star Aiden Lynch, gigantic offensive lineman from New Jersey, and 3-star defensive lineman Andrew Hanchuk from Cleveland. All these guys are in the top 1,000, and 2 of them are 4-stars. And 4-stars are not something we've seen a whole lot of. And then when we get to the blue chip ratio, you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. But the recruiting class went from the 38th in the country and launched in the top 25 last week. It's since popped down. June is a huge month for commitments across the nation. But Williams was our highest ranked commit in 4.5 years. Since Doug Nestor, he was the highest commit we've got since then. So it was huge. How did that big weekend play out, Doug? I know you got your ear to the ground much closer than we do. Was there a plan for the way these recruits released these commitments? Did the coaches know they were getting all 4 of them before they made their announcement?
There was definitely some orchestration there behind the scenes. A lot of times you're waiting on edits, and the school has to weigh their wishes with the wishes of the prospect. They want to go public in their time and get their time in the spotlight and all that stuff. And sometimes they want to go on their birthday and their mom's birthday or something, one of those things. So there's all sorts of variables, and you try and line it up as best you can. But I think by Sunday night, you were starting to get rumblings of a big result from the weekend, and it was just about a little orchestrating of how it's going to play out behind the scenes. But so I think they were pretty confident they had them before their public announcement. But I don't think they were confident going into the weekend that they were going to get them. Like, these weren't like preordained, definite. Like
it was,
they're coming on campus. Marcellus Barnes is the one in particular. Evan Watkins will tell you, like, he didn't come to campus expecting to commit. That was a close by Virginia Tech, which is definitely a positive.
Mm-hmm.
But the other guys maybe were leaning, and I certainly think like a guy like Andrew Hanchuk maybe was heavily, like, you get a sense of like they're telling you all the right things, and you think you can get them on the visit. But and then from there it's just planning and edits and making sure you see the bat signals go out from everyone on the staff. They're aware of the plan.
Oh yeah, the hype was big on that Sunday or whatever. I think Evan Watkins had put out like the 1, 2, 3, 4, and it's like, oh, are we getting a 4-star? And someone's like, no, we're getting 4 commits. And so like all this hype is building and whatnot. And it seemed like Gabe Williams was the ringleader, and he has been since then, in trying to recruit other guys to come to Tech. And not only is he the highest recruit in the class, so that kind of like has some weight behind it, but he's also a really big dude. He was just at a really important camp. But everything I heard about the weekend at Tech and what you just indicated is that it was a very impressive weekend to the recruits. They had a great impression on so many guys that they didn't even think they might get this soon. And so do you think with these 2 big 4-star commitments and just the momentum, that the perception of VT on the recruiting trail is starting to change a little bit?
I think it gives them some more, gives other recruits some more belief in what Pry is selling, so to speak. They're the first. They're the first 4 stars to hop on board, and somebody's got to be the first guys. And Gabe Williams, in particular, is definitely a really good one to have, given his enthusiasm for recruiting for Virginia Tech at this point, as one of the top prospects in the footprint. I think is a big one for him. Like you're getting really a local kid. I mean, I know he's from Maryland, but that's pretty darn close and right within Virginia Tech's key footprint to get that guy up there in that DMV area. That Maryland with Loxley is always tough up there. Penn State basically has that area, just picks who they want. I think that was just a big get, and especially in June when you've got a lot of kids making decisions and a lot of kids coming down to they've been in the recruiting cycle. If you say the recruiting cycle starts January 1st, let's just throw that out there. They've been the guys getting recruited for 7 months now, and a lot of them are getting ready to make their commitments before the season. So I think getting that kind of buzz from one of the top prospects in the footprint, which Brent Pry has obviously made a big focus, was key. And I think the other thing with the Gabe Williams commitment is like top linebacker prospect, 4-star. If you look at Virginia Tech's coaching staff, like if this coaching staff is not able to land big time linebackers, it's just not going to work. Like Brent Pry was one of the best linebackers coaches in the country. Chris Marv is the defensive coordinator. Sean Quinn coaches linebackers. Xavier DB was one of the best linebackers in school history. Like there's no shortage of resources on staff for linebacker play. And if they were going to continue to struggle to land those big time linebackers, that was going to be a big red flag. But that's not the case there.
I think the interesting part also is, with the big push that they were making on in-state and with the high school coaches and getting familiarity with all of them, making sure that they were in touch with all the schools, I bought into it in all regions, except I was a little bit skeptical of what was going to happen in the DMV, like in Northern Virginia and in Maryland, and just because of what's happened at Maryland with what Loxley has done and how well they've been recruiting, and Penn State really just forcing itself into that area. So I think in that sense, it makes me feel a lot better about the prospects of us, not just kind of getting Virginia minus, the Northern Virginia area as well. But, the fact that they went up there and took a Maryland kid is a positive sign.
Yeah, and the point about the linebackers is such a good one. And they were joking about it on the TSL podcast. Like, how many times did Pry drop Micah Parsons' name like during the recruiting process for any of these guys, whether it's Chris Cole, Gabe Williams? He is such one. He was a great player at Penn State, but he's now one of the best youngest players in the NFL, and our coach coached him directly. So other than having Vince Hall and the coaching staff, we've got there's a lot of linebacker push right now. And when Tech was great at football, it was largely because of our linebackers and our DBs. The defensive line was good, and there are tons of great defensive linemen, but that Vince Hall and a DB core of when we were like just rolling, Cornell Brown even going back, didn't Brown play linebacker? That is what I'd love to get back to, is get some real, the Tremaine Edmonds level of linebacker, which we had him, but there was kind of a dearth in between him now and before that. So love getting these guys in the fold. Are there any other names we should be keeping our eye on going forward into the summer, into the winter, of recruits, targets that this staff is really high on and is trying to get in the fold?
I think there's a couple coming up this weekend that should, I don't know if they're going to make their decision this weekend or in July or anything, but Keelan Adams is wide receiver, and Gerard Johnson, defensive end. Those are two. I believe they're both 4 stars, or Johnson's like a composite 4-star, whatever you want to call it. But Adams, their Tech is going head to head with South Carolina and Bama, and getting a visit this weekend, I believe, from him would be a big time get. And then Johnson's a defensive end. He's one of the few. I think he's number 6 player in Virginia, so he would be Virginia Tech's top recruited commit from the state of Virginia.
Wow.
Immediately if Tech were to get him, and he's down to Tech and UVA. He's one of the rare these days head-to-head battles.
That's bizarre.
Yes.
It's rare. It's like Keyshawn Burgos was a guy that probably flipped right after he started, but that's been it for like Tech UVA battles. There's a couple other ones I feel like in this cycle, but he's the big one that I think most have been considering him a UVA lean, but he didn't pull the trigger on his visit there, which was fairly recently, whether it was last week or the week before. So Tech's getting a crack at him. I think that could be a big swing if they were able to pull him away from UVA. And then Adams, obviously, anytime you're going toe to toe with South Carolina, Shane Beamer, they've got a ton of momentum. Like if you think Burnt Prize momentum the last couple of weeks has been positive, like South Carolina is over the moon with Shane Beamer and the momentum they've had there, and then Bama's Bama. So
yeah,
we'll see what happens there. Those are 2 big ones. Chance Wiggins is another big one. That's I think he's set a date in early July for a commitment. So we'll see what happens there. But they got 11 commitments right now. I think you're trying to head into the season where you can kind of narrow your core pool to fill out the class. And of course you're trying to figure out how many you need for the portal after the season. So I think if you can get up into the high teens by the start of the season, that gives you a good kind of zero in on your key uncommitted guys, anybody they're trying to flip, and then keep an eye on like late evals from guys that are having great senior seasons.
How do you feel about our chances with Chris Cole? I know I mentioned him a little bit ago. He's obviously a top guy. I think he was just at Georgia after after Tech. So what do you think about that? Do you think that if he was going to commit to Tech, he would have committed already? Do you think we are still or do you think he's just going to go out of state?
He feels like a guy that's trending out of state to me. Like, I mean, maybe, he's close enough. He can come up on campus during the fall for visits pretty easily.
And hasn't he been here? Hasn't he been to Blacksburg a lot?
He's been there a bunch, and he knows what it's all about. So I think Tech's obviously hanging around in a recruitment with like Georgia and all these other top programs that want him. So that's a big time battle. I don't know that I expect Tech to win it, but
I got you.
No.
With the class sitting at about 30 right now, I think I was just logging it. It's been dropping like every day this week just because. Did you see what Florida did this past week too? You mentioned South Carolina, but Florida got like 4 stars yesterday or something, like something absolutely insane. So
and that's kind of the orchestrating thing that I think is out. Like, I don't know if you guys remember, but like when Billy Napier first took over, they weren't doing that great on the trail. Everybody was like, "Hold the phone! What did we do here?"
Yep.
And now they've got the buzz, the June buzz from that kind of.
It can change so quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
But yes, we're sitting at about 30. Latest composite team rankings for the class. How high do you think this class can finish? And what do you think? What do you think the fan base would think is a successful, recruiting class ranking to end up with come this winter?
Yeah, I think they got a shot at a top 25 class.
Wow.
If they're at 30, they need to land a couple more blue chips. I think we're about to get into the blue chip discussion, but like that's the key. That's the key for me. I think 2 is more than they had last year in the class, or was it?
Yeah,
couple at the end of
they just had Ganem, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, they had 3. I've got them at 3 in 2020, 2 in 2023. I'm getting my years mixed up.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah, 2022. Yeah, and then one in 2020 and 2021, which is the big problem. 2 is not going to cut it. Two's a great start, and you got to start somewhere, and all the good things. But they need. I mean, looking back at Virginia Tech through the years, 7 is about where they have topped out in the modern Virginia Tech era. I think eventually that's where you should judge Brent Pry.
Yeah.
If you're getting back there, that's a pretty straight line for me of failure. Good class, bad class is are you landing enough of those guys right now after 3-8, and when you're still kind of selling the rebuild? Just getting back to like 4 or 5 is, I think, would be a big class for right now. I mean, you still went 3-8 last year, recruiting against a bunch of really good programs. So I think just this feels like get the process started, and then you got to keep raising your expectations until they're landing 7-8 blue chip guys.
And that's what is impressive about what they've done. We bring in Frady. I know he, might not be from a big time conference or something, or an FBS guy, but like, we were terrible last year, and that was probably our worst position last year, and you still were able to bring him in. We went 3-8, and you got 2 4-stars on, June 12th. So this is digging out of this hole was never going to be easy. And the fact that we have 2 4-stars right now in this class, like, I'm still impressed by that. Now, that's not gonna, for the class as a whole, like, I would say top 30. Rob, what do you think? Like, do you think you would be pleased with a top 30 class? Are you expecting
I think
that?
after a 3-8 season, I would be ecstatic with a top 30 class. I think I mean, it was pretty dreadful, and then not just even the 3-8, but the way the 3-8 happened and some of the losses that we took that really changed the landscape of Virginia, and really changed the landscape of Virginia and Maryland just in general from a recruiting ground standpoint. So I think that would be a very good move. And we talked about the linebacker. If we make some inroads at some positions that give us comfort that there's always going to be, not always, but generally a fallback for the defense where Pry's going to be able to pull people in at the positions that he should, then I think we can really feel like we're leaning forward, moving on with
That
the
was
program.
the Torian Gray thing, right? Like, we could always pull a couple of solid DBs because we had Torian back there, and even Bud with the linebackers. But you're right, getting into those comfort zones where, hey, maybe it's going to be wide receiver with Fontel Mines. Like, we just brought in 5 of them last cycle. We're in the mix for a couple more this time. Maybe it'll be that, but that's a good point, Rob.
I thought that was you kind of touched on it. The big thing about the Marcellus Barnes commitment, defensive back, 4-star, wasn't like a lock before he visited. So they closed him at a position that Tech loaded up on just a few months ago. Like, they brought in 5 defensive backs last class alone. So it's not like there's not obvious playing time that they're just saying, like, look, it's not defensive tackle where they're just like, look, there's gobs of playing time here. So I thought that was a noteworthy recruiting success of, like, number one, you're closing a blue chip guy who wasn't fully expected to pull the trigger that weekend, but number two, you're doing it in a position that you've got numbers at already that isn't, you're not selling like come in and play.
Yeah. And I mean, part of the reason we have the problem with Penn State and taking our guys is because of Coach Pry. And so eventually you would hope that would start to swing the other way. And the closing thing is huge because it's something that they always talked about with the Fuente staff. Like, closing was so hard ever since Chuck Canner left and those recruiting rankings fell off a cliff. We had not been able to close high end guys. And seems like we just did it pretty quick here with the Barnes commitment. And now we get another huge weekend coming up, and I can't wait to see what happens. Hopefully we'll have a couple more this time next week, but let's take a moment to talk about our sponsor before we get to blue chip ratio and some other questions for Doug. The Two Deep Hokies Under the Influence podcast is brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy app that allows you to make plays with our very own Hokies players. So come this fall, you're able to get some action on Jalen Lane's receptions, maybe Bashal Tutin's yards, our quarterback's TD numbers. But in the meantime, you can make plays on golf. We just had a crazy US Open, MLB. The summertime, there's lacking, but you can always get some money in your pocket with these Prize Picks plays. So download the Prize Picks app today. Deposit match up to $100. Memory lane, all one word. Prize Picks, daily fantasy made easy. Right now, I need to know what you boys are drinking. Rob, what you got over there?
So I have I don't know if either of you guys watch The Witcher or have watched The Witcher on Netflix. So
I know what it is.
yes. The main character, yeah, spoiler alert, is not coming back, evidently, because he's a pain in the ass to work with. So he got booted off the show. But Gerald's Gold is what I'm drinking. It's a non-alcoholic Hoppy Hells beer, the sweet ass can that's I love. And the show was awesome. I'm still excited for it to come back.
Show us
even
the
though it's
can.
going to be let's see.
There you go.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. So for non-alcoholic, it's pretty good health. I gotta admit. So I'm doing it just for you, Pete. I know you want to. I gotta spread the love beyond just IPAs and stouts. So I'm into your style of beer here.
I love a good Helles lager, so I appreciate that, Rob. Doug,
Yeah.
what are you drinking?
I've got a West Coast Baby Falcon from Triple Crossing in Richmond.
Nice.
I actually went there today because they got me on Instagram talking about their Space Falcon. And I showed up there and it was sold out. So I was like, I guess I gotta go with this. So it's a little West Coast IPA. I read about it. It's a lighter version of their Falcon Smash, which is the sweet nectar of Richmond.
Yes.
So it felt appropriate to.
So that's like their session version of the...
Yeah, I think so. They say you can drink it all day compared to a Falcon Smash.
Falcon Smash will get after you.
Going back to my drinking days, Triple Crossing Sneaky has probably the best IPAs in Virginia that most people want to go to, Aslan or something like that. I think Triple Crossing has some of the best IPAs that Virginia puts out there. So
they were definitely really good a few years back. Like whenever I'd visit down Richmond, like that was the place that had the new hot stuff. I know the Veil was up there as well.
Yeah.
But Triple Crossing, I still have one of their tulip glasses. It's like my favorite IPA glass to drink out of.
Yeah, they're great, and people drink Falcon Smash all as much as they can, but they got a lot of other good stuff too. So
I am drinking the Voodoo Ranger Fruit Force. This is like a super weird beer. I actually saw it in the store and like tweeted it out maybe 4 months ago. Be like, and I think I did the Austin Powers like, how about no? Like, because it just looked so lame. And someone's like, that's actually kind of good. It's called a Fruit Punch IPA. So I decided to try it. It is not red. I thought it might be red. You can see I'm ode to Shane Beamer here with my South Carolina glass, but it's like a hazy, typical Voodoo Ranger in the glass, but it does taste like fruit punch, and it's pretty darn good. It actually surprised me quite a bit. 9.5% alcohol. You'd never know. So it's real strong. It's got the force to it. I know they make a juice force as well, which I think is
good.
Also like 9%.
Yeah, the juice force has gone like full bro style on Instagram with because it's like 9.5%. It's basically the Sparks and Ford logo.
It's a Ford logo
of the modern day is what it is. It's hardly beer. Some of those that but Voodoo Ranger
You're right.
The Voodoo Ranger brand has basically leaned into it just being the bro get trashed beer of IPAs.
They taste good. I mean, what they're doing, it's almost like a better tasting like Mad Dog or White Claw or something. Like it's a beer version of White Claw. I don't even know, but you're telling me it's a fruit punch IPA. Usually when you have these fruit IPAs, it's a beer with like a little bit of fruit. This is just straight up like fruit punch. Like it really is. Like my mom would love this because it tastes like juice. But anyway, it's solid. I mean, I'm not going to hate on it. People seem to like it, and it tastes good, and it's going to get me drunk. So what can you do? Voodoo Ranger Fruit Force from New Belgium. All right, let's move to the blue chip ratio. Bud Elliott has done this for a long time. If you're not familiar with what it is, he takes the previous 4 recruiting classes and basically adds up your 4 and 5 stars and gives you a ratio. And those teams that are above 50%, he thinks have a chance to win the national title. Not that they are ranked in any way, but you just have to be at that bar to have a chance to win the national title. That's his theory, and it's held. There were some teams that were close to breaking it, but it hasn't broken. And Doug, I appreciated him doing this because it was hard to find the Virginia Tech blue chip ratios over the years, or even for this year until Doug's article. But in 2023, we are at our current lowest blue chip ratio recorded. In the modern era, these recruiting rankings have only been around for so long. So we're talking from 04 to 2023, and we're at 8.24%, which I was actually shocked is like sixth lowest in the ACC. It's not even close to last.
Yeah. Yeah. You look at like Syracuse, they haven't landed a blue chip in 4 years. So they're at 0.00%. Of course, Wake Forest backs it up. I forget what they were at, but it's like 3%. And
yeah,
they've clearly been successful. So 8.24%. I've got my spreadsheet here going through the years. Last year, 2022 was the previous low at 16%. So you can just see like those two classes of 2020 and 2021 with one blue chip just plummets it.
Yeah, they're killing us.
Yeah. So that's what's happening there. And if you can turn it around, you start to creep back up. I mean, the blue chip ratio is a indicator of national championship legitimacy. I haven't looked at like how good it is as an indicator of like ACC title legitimacy or even just like successful 8-win seasons or anything like that. It's on the list of things to look at, but I haven't gotten there.
I can even make it easy for you. Miami would make those stats abysmal.
Right.
So Miami alone would.
Miami is a national title contender this year, according to it. And
it has been for the last 15 years.
Exactly.
So.
I mean, like Tech's 2016 team, Fuente's first year that went to the ACC championship was at 16 point, was just above last year's team.
Yeah, one of the lowest we've had.
Right. So, I mean, that team, to me, that kind of shows you what a quarterback and a good defense can do for you.
I mean, that was all Gerard Evans.
Right. Right. I mean, without him, I even forget who would have been Motley was going to be the quarterback. Like the drop off would have been just ridiculously steep.
It would have been.
So that's, my hunch is that there's not a big correlation between like a certain level and ACC title contender.
And the nuance with it is funny because Bud hasn't really tweaked it because I'm not sure he's found the best way to do it. This year, he did put out versions including transfers as well. Yeah. And most of the top teams go down because they have guys that don't cut it, so they transfer to another school. And so it makes sense that the top teams who are bringing in so many blue chips would go down a little bit if you include transfers. But his whole thing is like, by not, obviously you can't account for evals, development, and off the field issues and transfers, all that kind of stuff. But just the fact that your program is recruiting at that level means that, you're doing something right. And so largely, it means you have dudes, but it also means like you're representing yourself on a national scale well enough to get those guys to come in.
Yeah.
And so it speaks to a lot of things. I was curious. I see we've been at, 25, 28 in 2020. Like that 2020 team was so loaded up, man. Like it really, I know COVID screwed things up. And we even had Khalil Herbert, who wasn't even included in that high calculation, who was the best player on the team.
Yeah. Was it Darrisaw on that team?
Yes.
He wasn't in it.
2-star.
Blackshear's an NFL running back. He was on it.
Yeah.
You can go back through that 2020 roster and just shake your head about what happened. And there's like you said, COVID played a big part of it, but there was a lot of missed opportunity with that roster and what could have been.
But going back to where my question, like in the early mid 2000s, we were around 30. Do you think that's where we should be? Do you think when we have things rolling, our ratio, can we get to the 30 mark again? Could we get to the 35 mark if Pry and staff keep doing what they're doing?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I threw out the 7 blue chips in our earlier discussion. That generally gets you into 30% range if you do that consistently. So Can they do it? That's what Justin Fuente topped out at, was 7 blue chips. He did it back-to-back years, and that's why that 2020 roster looked pretty strong. That's what Frank Beamer was doing, topping out at 7 in the mid 2000s, and they were in the 30s. So I think if you can get back there, you take a huge giant step. And the interesting thing to me is, like, Bud Elliott talks about this too, is like he admits that this thing is going to get, like, somebody's going to beat the blue chip ratio eventually, and he's like, it's probably going to be somebody that's pretty close, and they hit the quarterback lottery. Like, I mean, I don't think that they're not going to do it, but North Carolina would be a potential one, right? I think they're at 41%, and they got Drake May. So you get a quarterback like TCU with Max Duggan last year, who has an unbelievable season, and you got a chance. So I think if you can get to 7 at Virginia Tech and hit the quarterback lottery, now you're talking.
Yeah,
but you got to do it consistently for years, and that's the key.
Because TCU would have blown it up, right? I'm assuming, pretty badly. But even that is I know it's held true, but it's an anomaly, right? It's 1 year, and if in any sport, if you can come up with a stat that's held 14 out of 15 years, that's incredible. Anybody would be, amazed from a statistic standpoint to have something that's held up that. So even if it did get toppled 1 year, I don't think it's really going to change the trend anytime soon. I think the transfers have more likelihood of changing the arithmetic, I think, than anything else.
Yeah, and that's what everybody says, and that's what Bud is readily like. Basically, like, yeah, I'm trying to figure it out, but like, we have 20 plus years of high school recruiting data on how valuable 4-stars are, and it's like they just started giving transfers 4-stars, and like we said at the you don't still kind of feels like a crapshoot on if Daquan Felton is going to be worth anything as a transfer, or consistently those rankings have to kind of firm up and get some reliable data behind them on how much you can truly count on those making a difference. So it's an interesting thing to look at, and I think it's important to note that the blue chip ratio is just about like who's going to win it all, who's going to be the one team that wins the final game in early January. But like, if it's going to take a lot of, and with the playoff expanding, like, it's going to take a lot of playoff appearances before that starts mattering to a lot of Virginia Tech fans.
Well, that's
you'll take the playoff appearance and deal with, like, nobody's gonna be like, well, our blue chip ratio is just not high enough. Like, anytime
it doesn't
soon.
preclude you from winning the conference. Like, look, you just mentioned Wake Forest, right? They're at 3%. They almost won the conference 2 years ago. Clemson has a bad year, and they damn near won it against Pitt. So, you can win the conference with an 8% blue chip ratio. You just need things to really, really fall your way, and you could probably win the national title with a 40% if things fell your way.
Yeah, it's on my list to go back through and get all the historical data through all the ACC teams, because I'm really curious to see how that 7 ACC coastal teams in 7 years period played out, just to see if we can establish that. But it's on the list.
Well, let's get to some other things I want to talk to you about. Transitioning from the recruiting, because you were there in the spring. I want to talk about the guys that arrived on campus. There were 11 early enrollees by my count. Who impressed you the most of those guys that just got there in the spring?
Of the early enrollees?
Yeah.
I thought the most intriguing one was Jeremiah Coney, the running back.
Okay.
That's not a position that I expected him to be a early promising one. Like, I didn't expect that at all. Like, there's no playing time available at that position. He was a late ad from Hermitage, not a highly recruited guy, not a highly ranked guy. And I thought that was really interesting how he was definitely, like, they really liked what he was all about at running back. And like, I still don't think he should play, or, I mean, I think they should redshirt him. Maybe he gets 4 games or whatever, but that was really interesting to me, given what they did at running back, where they got Malachi Thomas coming back, hopefully healthy, and then adding Bashal Tootin and they just kind of kept talking about Jeremiah Coney as like a guy that's really impressive.
And even that started with the workout warrior stuff too. I mean,
Yeah, it was early. He was an early guy that they were like.
I saw that Aiden Green, he got a bunch of accolades at some point, and I think Cotman was a contributor. And the interesting thing about DB, and we'll talk about this in a minute, there's going to be opportunity there to get in the two deep as a freshman. And do you think Cotman will be one of those guys?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things you mentioned. Torian Gray, he was always playing guys early, like Cam Chancellor. Like if you're the third or fourth corner, you can play early.
Brandon
Faison, like steps right in. I mean, you can play early as a true freshman at corner. Mansour Delane last year didn't practice much at all in August. So that's a spot that I definitely think someone could crack the two deep pretty quickly. And certainly Cotman as the one DB. I think he was the only DB of that group to enroll early. The rest of them are coming in the summer. So
Mose, but he was playing safety.
Right. And that's another one. That's another one that's like that's partially because the safety position is extremely shallow right now, but partially because he stepped in right away and was ready to go.
Moving to some of the position groups, how do you think the additions of James Jeanette and Powell Ryland are going to affect our efficiency at defensive end? This is something me and Robbie talk about defensive end constantly, and getting Ryland was huge. And we talked about that in our last podcast, but Jeanette, like people kind of forgot about him as a JUCO guy. Do you think he's going to contribute this year?
I'm going to be really interested to see what kind of that first impression he makes in August, because we kind of heard conflicting things. I've heard that they expect him to play at some level, but I've also heard the opposite. So like, I don't know what to expect. I mean, he's a JUCO guy, played a little bit at William and Mary, and then went to JUCO. It's really hard to get a grasp of what level he's coming in at, but we've definitely heard that they think he could play right away. Certainly, I think there's opportunity for somebody else to emerge at defensive end, and he's got the tools. I mean, 6'5", long defense. That's prototypical promising defensive end. So yeah. So I think those first couple of weeks are going to be huge for him in terms of trying to crack into that top four. McCrae's been around for a while. Nelson's been around for a while. Those feel like difficult to dislodge. Powell Ryland's going to be up there, if not at the top. So there's not a ton of playing time available, and feels like that's a battle that'll firm up and be difficult to crack after the first couple weeks of August. So those are going to be. I think that's key for him is how good of start in August can you get off to.
And I think Jeanette did an interview with 247 on the Inside the Tunnel podcast. I'm pretty sure I listened to it, and it sounded he's saying all the right things. I mean, he seems like a kid that is on the ball, wants to come here and instantly make an impact. And the guy that transferred out, Moiston, left for Cincinnati.
Yeah,
that opens up an opportunity for him. And so it would be, he was the number one. I know the JUCO rankings, and maybe you know better than me. Like people say, oh, that ranking's paper thin, but it was a very high ranking for James Jeanette. So I'm hoping that he can come in here and make an impact.
Yeah, he's not like he's an older JUCO, right? He's like 3 years into it. So, in terms of college years, he's getting up there into that upperclassman stage where, you just have a physical advantage over like Keyshawn Burgos is going to be trying to get his largest role yet, but he's 2 years behind him. And I think that's especially on the defensive line, that's probably pretty beneficial for him.
And the McDonald brother, I think that's Jordan McDonald, defensive end, could be an impediment as well. And I mean, those McDonald twins are enormous. So hopefully
he might end up a defensive tackle by the time it's over.
Wow. Yeah. I just saw a picture of them the other day because they've been doing all the workout stuff, and they're just huge.
I think on my my tombstone is going to say it's going to be loving father, husband, and still looking for an edge rusher that can finish. That's going to be the whole thing.
Ever since Daddy Nicholas's lobster hands, we've been
ever since lobster hands is still looking for an edge rusher that can finish.
Yeah. That's by far the biggest, if you're looking at Tech's defense, if you can just get the quarterback on the ground a little bit more, it would be such an impactful boost for the rest of the defense, obviously.
Yeah.
But and that's something they just haven't had for a long time.
It's been so lacking. And even when guys like Garbett have played well, they have a hard time staying healthy or staying consistent. Barno, year 2. What happened to him? We'll still never know. Let's move on to some of the other positions. You talked about this with Bud Elliott on the summer school series. One of my favorite things that Bud does every summer. But after everyone gets there this fall, Stone Snyder's there and everything. Which position will you have the most confidence in going into the 2023 season?
I think it's the corners. I think Delane, obviously, coming off a big year. Dorian Strong. People kind of forget about how good he was. He was a pretty darn good cornerback early in his career, and then he gets hurt last year and misses most of the year. That's a big addition. I think Derek Canteen is going to be maybe the most impactful addition of any of the transfers. The wide receiver position obviously was just such a poor position until they got this guy, so they may win it. But Canteen, for what he brings, as a true nickel corner, Tech will tell you that Chamari Connor played the nickel spot last year, not because it was the best fit for him, but because he was the best option. And I think upgrading that spot where they can truly play a confident nickel defense with a guy like Canteen, or whether Strong slides in there, Delane, whatever they want to do, having that three true corners to defend slot receivers and stuff like that. I remember writing those game previews and be like, I don't know who's going to guard Josh Downs in the slot against Carolina.
It was a scary proposition.
It was a clear mismatch every single week. And they just had to deal with it as best they can. And I think that was a big time upgrade to be able to go get him. I know they love his leadership and his work ethic and all that stuff off the field, which is helpful. Especially when you're looking at a guy like Mansour Delane, who everybody tells is the best thing since sliced bread as a cornerback and all that stuff. It can be helpful for them to see somebody like Canteen, I think, that just works at it and came in and made such a big impression early in the spring. So I think he's going to be a big addition and gives Tech a really strong cornerback room where you got 3 really good corners, gives you some injury protection with the top 2 as well. So I think he was a big addition and gives them, even if Tech doesn't get the defensive end pass rush that they need, you're at least stronger on the back end for the guys covering the receivers.
No, I think you're probably right on with that. As for the backups, I don't know, but the starters are certainly our strongest group of starters, without a doubt. Which position group gives you the most concern? At the same thing, you got everyone there on campus. You're going into week 1. What are you scared of week 1?
It's still the offensive line. It could be the house of cards that falls down with. I mean, they got lucky with injury luck last year that nobody on their below average offensive line had to miss significant time and throw everything into chaos. So
it could have been a Boston College situation, right? Because they were so decimated on the offensive line. They
Mahogany,
were defensive linemen.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's just, I like a lot of Tech's young offensive linemen and where that position group is going. I just don't know that it's going to be there in 2023. That those guys are going to be. I mean, if you go if Chaplin and Braylon Moore are your left tackle and left guard, that is a big uncertainty on an entire side of the offensive line. Tech upgraded the skill positions well. I'm really high on Tootin, really high on Jalen Lane. You think that you'll get some improvement from the quarterback position, but it may not matter. I always go back when I talk about the Tech offensive line. It's we saw what a horrible offensive line did to the Florida State program for literally years. It took them, and they were just awful because
it's a half a decade. It was almost 7 years, I think, maybe in total.
And that's how precarious it is, where you're just not going to be able to compete without a strong offensive line. And I like what Parker Clements, how he finished last year. If he's healthy, Caden Moore, he's the most experienced and probably the best, or the guy you feel most good about. But the rest is just hopefully they're they're able to compete at like a average ACC level right away right now. But Chaplin still's only played 28 snaps against Liberty. It's hard to be confident about that group.
You're right on about turning a program around with a bad offensive line is so difficult. Penn State went through those struggles with Hackenberg. You just mentioned the Florida State example, which is a prime example. And even Clemson, when they were coming up under Dabo, they had the quarterback and they had, Sammy Watkins. It took them a little while to get good enough on the lines to start whipping people. And so it's going to be challenging. Do you think the Crook change will help suit the skill sets of the guys we have better than maybe what we had with Rudolph last year?
Yeah, I know people like to hate on Rudolph now. I still think he was a really good offensive line coach and would have had a lot of success at Virginia Tech given the time. Crook seems good. He's a prototypical. He's like spitting, like everything about him exudes offensive line coach. And it sounds like they're off to a good start there. That's going to be an interesting thing to watch, given that he came in 3 days before spring practice started,
Right.
and I don't know how truly effective that spring practice development wise could have been. That's a question going forward that you have to think about. So I don't know. I think it's up in the air on whether Crook is an immediate upgrade or even a long-term upgrade over Rudolph, Rudolph is the resume still speaks for himself, and he just got, Notre Dame comes calling. It's going to be hard to turn down.
No doubt about that. And it wasn't a knock on Rudolph so much of, sometimes coaches work better with different players, and maybe our players would be more suited to the scheme that Crook's going to run. I certainly hope so because it was so bad last year. And it didn't really improve much, especially in the pass game. The run game did get a little bit better as the year wore on, and hopefully it does. One more question before we cut you off here. And honestly, we've already kept you too long, but we do appreciate it. Leaving the offensive line out of the equation, which group has the biggest drop off between the starters and the backups? So you can't choose the offensive line. Where do you feel really good about the starters, but the backups, you really know nothing?
I think safety is an obvious one. I think you feel, Mose Phillips has a bright future. I just don't know whether he's ready to go as a true freshman. Coming in in the spring clearly helps. And then I think the other backup there is Jalen Jones, who was a wide receiver until yesterday. So that's concerning to me. I wonder if there would be a little shuffle the deck of Canteen or Delane sliding over as the true backup safety if one of those guys went down. Just trying to make the best of your 4-man lineup there in the secondary. So that's one spot that I think is a big time question mark if Stroman or Peoples gets hurt. It could the difference in level there could be stark. And then I think you're still looking at wide receiver there. Jennings, Lane, Felton, much needed additions right at the top of the depth chart, but I'm not confident on many of the guys below them at this point. I think if they stay healthy and all that, I think they're going to catch a ton of passes and be extremely productive, at least compared to last year, and really help Virginia Tech's offense. But below them, I don't know if DeJuan Lofton is ever going to take that step.
I haven't heard anyone mention him since last year. So
right. So it's
that's
Tucker Holloway is encouraging.
Yes.
For sure. But
that question I just asked you, the drop off, you could pick 4 different positions. Yeah. You could pick wide receiver, you could pick safety, you could pick corner, you could pick linebacker. You could pick offensive line, but I didn't even let you pick that one.
Yeah. And linebackers is a dark horse, quietly just a giant concern. You don't know who's going to be the Mike linebacker right now.
It could be really exciting and it could be really good.
Yeah.
But it's also a big unknown because there's a lot of different bodies in there and you're not quite sure where the positions are all going to shake out.
Yeah. And they were banged up all spring. McDonald.
Yes.
I forget which one's the linebacker, Jordan or Jaden.
I think it's Jaden.
He was banged up. Jaden Keller has bounced between the two positions. Lawson, you feel really, really, really good about, but is he a finished product yet? I don't know. Tisdale missed most of his. I mean, it's just so many question marks there, and feel like anytime you're going to enter August, not knowing who your Mike linebacker or not, maybe they strongly are leaning somewhere, and we just don't know it. But
you want someone to grab one of those positions like by the horns. And even Jenkins, who's been solid the last couple of years, he can only be on the field so much, depending if you're playing a nickel corner or whatever else. So not knowing who the Mike is when it's one of the two linebacker positions is interesting. Will it be Stone Snyder? Will it be one of the guys that's already been here? Will it be Tisdale, who's not really been a Mike? It is a low key dark horse, scary spot. You're right.
Yeah. At least we have some competition there with the wide receivers. Those three transfers walked out of the bathroom stall and took the starting spots. It was they showed up. It was like stretch. You're the starters. All three of you.
I forget. Wow. I forget when it was. It might have been at the recruiting night in Richmond when they hosted all the high school coaches in the Richmond area. We were there, and I was. I can't remember but I was talking to Pry and I was like, how does that first team meeting in January go when you walk in and there's 8 new transfers and everyone in the room knows that those 3 wide receivers are immediately starters. And it's like, how do you even how do you have that conversation with the team where it's like, here's Jalen Lane and Allie Jennings and Daquan Felton. Everyone's like, there's our 3 starting wide receivers right there.
Yeah. It's funny. Like, it's kind of like, it's a very miniature version of what Dion did.
Yeah.
Having to introduce what'll be 50 guys coming here. But the Dajuan Lofton, me and Rob talked about it on the podcast a couple weeks ago. Like, I'm surprised he didn't transfer. Like, when you bring in those 3 wide receivers, which are clearly like meant to take your spot or at least compete for it heavily, I'm very surprised he didn't leave. And hey, if he battles it out and tries to beat him out, kudos to him. I hope he does. But I was surprised by that.
You want the optimistic Dajuan Lofton take?
Yes.
He's a slot receiver. I mean, he's played both spots so far because he had to. Slot receiver, Jalen Lane's going to play a ton in the slot. That competition, finally. I mean, he's been at Virginia Tech for 2 years now, or his first 2 seasons. He had no competition. He was just the best option by default. Now he's competing every single day with Jalen Lane, who was extremely productive at.
He can play.
Yeah, he's a legitimate player. So does that help him? Does that get him over the hump? I mean, both Fuente and Pry, both coaching staffs have said like he's a good player.
You're right. Leading into both seasons, they gave him a lot of pats on the back.
Him and Jaden Keller are the 2 guys that, no matter the coaching staff, were immediately like, that guy.
Which is so surprising why Keller didn't get more playing time last year. I mean, you come out of the fall, if you heard it then, at the end of the season, you look at his snap count, like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, why didn't he play more?
Yeah. It's one of those things with a young player. I mean, Tisdale missed half the season too.
Right.
So
he had every opportunity. And so maybe like he didn't grasp the mental side of the game. Like, I don't know. And maybe that'll come, the light will come on this year for Keller. I hope so. Cause he definitely has, we talk about having the physical tools. He has that. And and so hopefully that does, because there's another opportunity at linebacker this year for sure.
Yep.
Well, Doug, thank you so much for coming on. Why don't you tell people where they can find you, where they can read your stuff, all of that?
I'm on vtscoop.com, 24/7 sports text, 24/7 sports site. You can read me there. I'm on Twitter at Doug Bowman 24/7, I believe.
That's correct.
And that's and that's basically where I am. Yeah.
Okay. Very nice, dude. Well, thank you so much for being with us tonight and just shedding some light on recruiting and the blue chip ratio and just your thoughts on the team. I know you wrote a off-season offensive piece and an off-season defensive piece. Like, you've been doing a lot of work over there. So keep it up and we'll look forward to reading you all season.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Later, bud.
Appreciate it.
All right, Rob, you still with me?
I'm here.
All right, just a couple things before we sign off here. Doug was great. Great guest. Seems like a cool regular dude. Drank some beer with us. Gotta love
Yeah,
that.
I love it.
Game
And
times.
he's coming fresh off of a all-star appearance with one of our favorite guy in the industry with Bud Elliott. So where he came to slum it with us after being with the top brass on his podcast in the summer show for Bud Elliott's summer stuff.
It's true. Bud is a big deal in the college football world, especially in like the college football nerd world. Like
Gambling world, nerd
yeah,
world, all of
gambling.
those.
Like
Yep.
we all love Bud. So yeah, Doug gets to talk to him every year in the summer school series. So that's pretty cool. We got a couple of game times announced for the September games. So
Yep.
ODU is going to be at 8 p.m. And this is news a couple weeks old, but I still think it's pertinent. 8 p.m. on ACC Network, the big ACC Network game of the week. Why is this game at 8 o'clock at night?
That it's Virginia schools. That ODU could beat Virginia Tech. Maybe that people will tune in.
I just wanted to play them in the 3:30 slot. Like no one's paying any attention. It's not the last games of the day.
I was hoping for a nooner. Forget the 3:30
exactly.
slot. A lot of people are watching 3:30, and at least by 8 p.m., a lot of people are blacked out, so they don't remember it. But if the 3:30, everybody definitely sees, which leads into the other two times that we found out about as well.
Yeah, the Purdue game is a nooner, so that's on ESPN too. So at least we're on a national network, so to speak, for the Purdue game, but it is at noon. Which could you envision us playing Purdue at any other time? I mean, it just seems to make too much sense.
The big drum, everything just fits so perfectly for
Purdue
a noon
Pete,
spot
right?
for that. Yeah, Purdue Pete, that nightmare fuel, like
freaky ass Purdue Pete
with the huge chin. And then we got Rutgers at 3:30 on the Big Ten Network.
Finally, a great game, and it's the away game. Like a great game time, I should say. Not a great
game time. I think they gave it the spot because this is the rematch of the 13-10 2012 punt game. 20 punts, five combined turnovers, and just under 400 combined yards between the two teams. Did
you look up the punt game today, Robbie?
I did.
I'm proud of you.
Each team had 196 yards exactly. Both teams put up 196 yards in total offense.
Is weird. That game is seriously like one of the weirdest football games. And then you add to it the fact that it was the Russell Athletic Bowl.
Yep.
Like it wasn't a regular season game. It was a bowl game.
Yeah.
A bowl game that is now defunct with 20 punts, 196 yards of offense for each team.
So that's why we got the 3:30. It's there's a lot of bad blood between us and Rutgers, evidently, since that game.
You know, the Rutgers game being at 3:30 will be fun, and I actually do think with the amount of Hokies in the Northeast, it will be heavily. I mean, I know Billy and Pat are both New Jersey guys. They're going to be up for it. You may come up for it.
Yeah.
It's going to be a blast. My cousins went to Rutgers. So there's a lot of there will be a lot of Hokies fans up here. And it will be a fun tailgate and all that stuff. I encourage anyone to come up. I know Billy is doing something with the Suns for a pregame. So it'll be a blast. But that team with Schiano as coach, no, they're not great, but like it's not going to be an easy game, especially on the road.
It's a Schiano Rutgers team, which is what you don't want. This is not Rutgers. Schiano's success, the only success Rutgers has ever had is with him. And it's it's a team that is in a conference and a side of the conference that they are used to just getting the shit kicked out of them by Ohio State and Michigan and all of these people. So when they get a chance to play a team like Virginia Tech, they're going to be out for trying to get a W.
Right. I mean, we're Virginia Tech and we might have a little bit of more history than Rutgers, I'd say, but we were horrible last year. And so to them, looking at that as an out of conference game at home, that's a chance for a W.
Yes.
And so it's going to be a hard fought game. It makes me a little nervous, but what do you feel better about, us beating Purdue at home at that nooner, or us beating Rutgers on the road at 3:30?
That's a great question. Purdue can give people fits. I was in the stadium when they almost beat Ohio State, and Ohio State played for the national championship that
They
year.
give Ohio State hell sometimes.
Yeah, Purdue can be salty, but I think Virginia Tech will be okay against Purdue at home. It's usually not the first time the team doesn't lay down when it's the first time of playing somebody at home. That I think there's usually some energy behind that'll get.
And they got a
behind
new
them.
coach too. Like
Yes.
Brom's gone.
Yeah, Brom they fired. So that was
No,
a
wait.
mess.
Louisville, right? He got picked up by Louisville.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's I think I have more confidence in Purdue, strangely, than I do in Rutgers.
Yeah. And I would agree with you on that. The ODU game, we're heavy favorites in that game. And I obviously I'd rather be a heavy favorite than a heavy dog, but it's there is no Virginia Tech fan out there that has taken us as a 14-point favorite over ODU.
Not even close. It's not, especially without an announced quarterback. And no, I'm not at all believing that 14 for a minute. I won't believe the 14 until the game's over.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think last year going into it at ODU, was it like 7 or 8 points that we were favored by? Something like that?
I think the line was started at 11-ish, and I think it bled down to by like game time like 7 or 8. Yeah.
And then we saw how that one ended. Well, let's get to our first record predictions, because we're already kind of, tiptoeing around it here with these first couple out of conference games. But we also got to go to Marshall, and that we got to go to Florida State. We got to go to Pitt. I think we got to go to UVA. We got to go to BC. And that's one of the things that annoys me about this schedule. It's an ACC schedule, and the out of conference games aren't tough, but there are a lot of road games, and playing on the road is not great. Like, you got to go to Marshall. Like, Marshall's not a pushover. And now you're in Huntington for the game. You got to play Rutgers, and you got to go to New Jersey. It's just not a great schedule. The two easiest teams on the schedule, which are UVA and BC, pretty much. And as far as the ACC games go, they're both on the road. So we couldn't even get done the favor of, playing UVA or playing a bad BC team and get them at home. We got to go to Chestnut Hill. So with all of that in mind, I'll let you go first on your record prediction. And, if this is the first one, you don't have to be perfect this time. Just next time.
Just next time I'll get it locked in. I'm double checking what I wrote down. I'm not doing team by team. We'll do that later.
No, of course not.
But I have 7-5.
What?
What? I do. And how I got there, well, I said I wasn't going to go team by team, so I might be blowing.
But you must feel good about the out of conference games.
I feel good about we will get a W versus either Purdue or Rutgers, potentially both. I think neither of those teams I think are going to be vaunted. So I think absolutely those. I think ODU will be fine in the sense of there's not more after everything that happened last year, and just that is the one game where we're going to be.
They can't lose that game.
Exactly. There's going to be so much energy. So I think we could come out with 2, potentially 3 wins early, and then going to Marshall, like you said, that is actually a tough game in Huntington. So I'm not so sure about
right after 2 Power 5 teams for us.
Yeah. But I actually feel pretty good about the Syracuse, Louisville, BC 3-game stretch a little bit later in the season. And then finishing off, I don't know what UVA is going to be this year, but it's not great. But I don't know. I have a feeling that things could be good this year. Who knows? I could be talking out my ass. It could be I could be coming back after I look into this deeper with 5-7 for all I know, or 4-8. But right now, that was my first glance at it, and it's a first glance.
Hey, dude, I appreciate it. And my surprise is that a lot of people are worried about us getting to 4 or 5 wins. And so
Mhm.
you putting down 7, coming out hot, it took me back. I've been bouncing back and forth for like 3 months between 5 or 6 wins. I'm
Mhm.
not going to go 7, but I have been waffling between 5 or 6. I think last year we were probably at least a game better than the 3-8 record. I thought we could have at least finished 4-7. We didn't play a complete season. So anyone who's saying, "Oh, 3 wins, 3 wins." Yes, we got 3 wins. We only played 11 games. And
Correct.
so would we have beaten UVA? I don't know, but I like our chances in winning that game.
Mhm.
This year, UVA, they're terrible. We've owned them for the better part of 20 years. To me, that's a win. The BC game at Chestnut Hill terrifies me. The Louisville game you commented on, new coach, who everyone's calling the second coming, and Brom, they lost a ton of guys to the draft. They lost like 25 guys to the portal. And yes, they added 25 guys in the portal, good guys. But meshing all of that in year one, I don't know what Louisville is going to look like. I think that's a potentially winnable game. The out of conference games are all winnable. You could go, 4-0, you could go 1-3. But if you believe in the progress and the changes that were made, the QB coach and the wide receivers, we should get at least 2 of those games, hopefully 3. And if that happens, a long way of me saying I'm gonna go. My initial prediction is 6-6. I think we can get to a bowl. It may be a little too bullish because if we only win 2 out of conference games, it's going to be really hard for us to go 500 in the ACC. To go 6-6, we probably need to win 3 out of conference games. But I'm going to
So
say 6-6.
so let me do some math for you of how also I got there.
Sure.
Right? Would you say last year's schedule for each of these questions, it's going to be about the same, harder, worse, better, worse? Those are your 3 options. Schedule this year versus last year. Just off the
Um,
cuff, would you think?
Harder,
How, like, materially, or,
not
relatively?
materially.
Okay, so relatively. Okay, so then let's say, so last year we had 3 games that we lost by like 3 points or whatever. That could have very easily gone the other direction, right? In an 11
Mhm.
game season where we only won 3 games. Okay, so let's put that out there. Bad breaks, if you want to do the Bud Elliott, those things, turnover margin, all that sort of stuff usually comes back to net zero at a certain point over a long enough period of time. Would you say our offensive line this year could be on par with last year, better, or of
I
course it could be
assume that
worse?
it's going
So,
to be better.
okay. Now, wide receiver, what would you say?
Better.
Okay. The defensive line.
Better.
Okay. DBs.
Better.
Okay. So is my point
Yeah,
proven here in
yeah,
that?
no, I like the point. I like the
So
point.
I
Running back
get it.
better, tight end better.
So yes, I that is kind of my back of the envelope thought process on this. Is the offensive line was atrocious last year. Last year, our offense, our collective offense, was, Bud Elliott said it on the podcast that he did with Doug. He said the Virginia Tech stats for offense last night were absolutely, in terms of success rate, atrocious, almost the worst that he had seen in like the last 5 years.
Horrible. Yeah.
So my point is, yes, could it be status quo for this year? I think that's a very real possibility that we put out the same team. I think all of us would be very concerned if the team that comes out on the field this year is as bad as the team that was out there last year in terms of offensive success rate, in terms of wide receivers, having more people to throw to, all of those things should be a little bit of marked improvement there. And I don't think Rutgers and I don't think Syracuse is going to be that great. Great, who knows what? I don't. There's a few teams on there that I think BC is not going to be that great this year. Purdue, I don't know. They're going to coaching change. Louisville's got a coaching change. There's enough there that I could see.
Look, I mean,
Yeah.
Q's, BC, UVA, they suck. I mean,
Mhm.
they will not be good teams this year. Now we have to caveat that with we also suck. So,
Yes, I agree.
but Q's being at home is helpful. If that game was up north, I wouldn't feel nearly as good about it. I think we're beating Syracuse at home. BC on the road, I don't feel good about it, but the UVA
No, we
game
never do.
should be a win, and the BC game really should be a win. They are terrible. They lost Jerkovich, who was the only and Zay Flowers, the only two reasons they were good, and so those should be wins on paper. Those 3 games. However, you're just by the law of things, you're probably going to lose one of them.
Yeah.
But if you win all 3 of those, you win a couple of those out of conference games, and you take the rest, 6-6 is very possible. And you talked about 1 point lost to NC State, 1 point lost to GT. You could have potentially won a 4th game against UVA. So now you're talking about Pry actually being the head coach instead of being the defensive coordinator for the entire season, allowing him to focus more on us not making penalties, focus on the right timeouts, focus on the right substitutions, all the things that a head coach does throughout a game. That should improve us by, a few percentage points as the year goes on. So I'm not sure I agree with your 7-5. Maybe I will after I do the previews, but it's not a hard schedule. And despite the away games, I think we can go 6-6, and getting to a bowl after all the negativity and the bad offense and all that stuff would be huge for this team, would be absolutely huge.
Yeah. So anyway, I just wanted to throw some insight into because I was doing it quickly. I wasn't going through, and mark in win or loss for each one, but I was really doing it at a high level comparison of the positions and the schedule compared to last year.
And people do forget that we were competitive even in the West Virginia game, in the Pitt game, where we had a guy run for 350 yards on us or whatever it was and 6 touchdowns. We were in that game in the 4th quarter. We had a chance to win. We had a chance to win the West Virginia game. And we at halftime, remember teams kept scoring us before halftime, put us in a hole. But even still, we fought in those games and we had a chance. If we are just the slightest bit better in a few aspects of the game, as you hinted at, those could turn into wins.
Yeah. So
anyway, all right. Well, that's going to do it. We talked long time to Doug, and me and Rob went on too long for this, but we appreciate you guys listening. We are going to be doing our previews of our opponents. We'll do the first 6 games of the year, kind of detail the teams we're going to play, and then we'll do the second. It'll be, part 1 and part 2. So you get the idea. We've done it in past years, but that'll be coming to you in July. We may have something else coming to you in June, but you'll just have to wait and see. But until next time, make sure you rate, review, and subscribe. Spotify and Apple Podcasts. You can hit us on Twitter. It's at 2DVT. Make sure to follow me and Rob on Twitter, and also follow Doug. Doug Bowman at 247. And until next time, when we're hopefully, talking to you about our opponents or whatever else, and you're getting down to the shore and having some beers on the beach, go Hokies.